What is up, guys? My name's Finn. Welcome to Treehouse Off-Road. Thanks for watching. Today, Michael and I are going to be doing a 6-inch lift on this 06 Sequoia 4x4. It's completely bone stock at the moment, but our customer is from Hawaii. And if you know anything about truck culture out there, they love their Toyotas and they love them really tall. I think this video will be pretty significant. What we're about to do has not been documented on YouTube yet. We're going to be doing a 6-inch lift total. The front will be getting a Tuff Country 5-inch drop bracket lift paired with a set of Bilstein 5100 height adjustable struts using the stock springs for a total of 6 inches. As you can see, she's sagging a little bit in the back. The rear air suspension will be getting swapped over to a set of Apoc springs with some spacers to match the front. We'll also be replacing the lower ball joints with Toyota units because that's what you do. Our customer Dante is from Hawaii, and it was actually cheaper for him to fly to LA, buy a car, pay for lodging while he's here, fly back to Hawaii, and have his truck shipped to the island. I guess if you're looking for a Toyota truck or SUV, Hawaii is not the place you want to go. The customer does not plan on off-roading this ever, hence why we chose a bracket lift for this install. Let's get this thing on the rack and get going. All right, let's take a look at some of the components that are included with the Tuff Country lift. These are the spindles. They come with bearings pre-installed and upper ball joints pre-installed. And here's the rest of the Tuff Country lift. We won't be using the lift blocks or the rear U-bolts. This is a Tundra lift, so that stuff is in here. So we got the actual bracket itself. This is what's gonna position the lower control arms and the diff relocation brackets, steering rack stuff, sway bar relocation, coilover spacers, which I don't think we'll be using because we got the extended Bilstein, steering shaft spacer, 3 giant bags of hardware, and actual printed instructions, which I really appreciate. Sway bar end link removal. Sway bar removal. Remove the ABS plug. Ball joint separator. Now it's time to remove this axle nut cap and then the axle nut. Someone's either done a really good job with this or it's never been done. Usually we get them in and there's big dings and spaces. We'll see when we get in there if it's rust free or not. I start with a teeny little flathead, then move up to a larger flathead, then medium chisel, large chisel. And that's all so you don't compromise this seal. It is possible to get it off unscathed. And this is why you want to do that. Look how clean that is. This has never been into. Four lower ball joint bolts. Time to remove the struts. We aren't reusing these, but instructions do say to mark them, driver and passenger. Don't do that. I suggest leaving one nut on top and tight. That way it doesn't fall out on you like mine did. There you go. Okay, we're gonna remove the bracket that holds the high and low pressure lines to the steering rack. And now we're gonna detach the rack and pinion. Now we're gonna zip tie the rack to the old sway bar mounts. And then the last center bolt, you gotta get out from the top. This is a stud that needs to be removed. Okay, so on the driver's side, we already removed the nut. Now we're gonna remove the long bolt that goes through the cross member and the rack. Now we're up where the steering shaft connects to the rack. We're gonna put a match mark. So this is what they want you to do, but I don't believe that's enough since this spins. So I'm also gonna do a second one. Just in case it spins, I'll have a home base. So now we're gonna go up and make another scribe line on the shaft and the shaft coupler. There's a shot of all our scribe lines. We're gonna remove this bolt that secures the shaft to the rack and pinion. Okay, behind that splash guard, bottom bolt on the shaft coupler comes out. And these are special bolts, so don't mess them up. I made the mistake of doing this when I did my body lift. So now we have to remove this section of shaft between the coupler and the rack. As you can see, it's pretty loose. So we have the rack being supported by the zip ties, and my hope is that if I can pry this out, it'll pull down enough to be able to remove this center section. Perfect. Okay, so this came disconnected, and now I'm just gonna try to pull this guy down. Might have to bang it from up top. Got it. We're under the truck. The front diff has 3 mounts. 1, 2, 3. We have to take out the rear one. My hex bolt is just spinning. I can see the top turning when I spin it. Next step is to take off the lower control arms, and we just pray now that they're not seized. Man, this thing's in good shape. More new parts. If you know, you know. Okay, here's where we're at. Both sides are looking like this. The rack is completely disconnected aside from the lines, and I actually put another zip tie through the top lines and around the front drive shaft to open up this gap a little bit because I do have to start cutting on this cross member. I also use brake clean to clean the section I'll be cutting so I can mark it. Okay, starting at the midpoint of this mounting hole, we're gonna come in 3 1/4 inches, which puts us basically in center line with this hole right here. And I'm just gonna eyeball straight up and down, and there's our cut line. I'll trace this around each side. Okay, same thing on the passenger side, but instead of going in 3 1/4 inches, we're going in 5 3/4 inches. I mean, it'd be cool if they warned you that thing was just gonna drop out, but common sense told me it would anyway. If I had to do this again, I would have painted this raw metal now instead of further into the project like we ended up doing. All right, next we're gonna raise this transmission jack so that it supports the front diff. Bolt goes through the frame, nut captures it up top. Now we gotta remove the driver's side bracket from the diff. On the passenger side, there's only 2 bolts. Next, we're going to use 2 ratchet straps to hang the diff from the frame rail so we can remove the transmission jack. I found it easiest to strap this thing by the inner CV joints, not the actual diff. At this point, we should be able to lose the transmission jack. I'm using a shelf to help stay organized during this job. There's a lot of pieces. Next step is we're going to grab these diff mount brackets and build these up. 4 bushings, 2 sleeves. Now we're going to put the Tuff Country diff brackets on using the stock hardware along with a 9/16 washer on each bolt. Now we're going to take one of the Toyota bolts up through the front diff bracket and into the cross member. Put the nut on loosely for now. Same on this side. I don't even know why we removed the transmission jack. If I could go back, I wouldn't have done that because there's no real good spot to hang this with these straps. And this wasn't in the way in the slightest bit. I do think it's a little odd that we're using the huge Toyota washers on there, especially because they don't cover the bushing entirely. It's a lot of pressure on the middle area, but none on the outside, but that's what they said to do, so we're gonna run with it for now. 3/4 inch bolts, the 4 3/4 inch Stover nuts, 8 3/4 inch flat washers. We're also gonna grab our cross member. So you got a longer and a shorter mounting point. The shorter one goes in back. You can also make sure that this mounting location is in back for the rear of the diff. So I'm gonna get these straps out of there. I'm gonna lift this up and then try to locate those ends into those mounting points. I think I'll put a bolt through just to get it started. Now I can kind of get this stud in here. She's in. And you can see that diff stud landed right where it was supposed to land. It needs a little persuasion, but not much. There's that big old boy. Next step, we're on the driver's side. 1/2 inch bolt goes through the new cross member and the front diff bracket. I've been having to manipulate the transmission jack quite a bit to get this hole to line up. I taped the bolt to the end of my drift with electrical tape, but there's no room in there to hold it. I'm just gonna see if this works. It did, it worked great. It also gets 2 washers and a Stover nut. Same thing on the passenger side. You want the diff mounts on the inside of those tabs, and that step is done. Okay, now we're coming back to the rear diff mount. We're going to use the original hardware and tighten it back on. Now all these 3/4 inch bolts are going to get Loctite and tightened to 125 foot-pounds. Okay, now these diff bracket bolts need to be tightened to 85 foot-pounds with blue Loctite. I'm just going to remove them one by one and do that. Repeat for all 3 of those, and the 2 on the passenger side as well. These 2 get thread locker and torque to 75. And then for the differential bracket and cross member bolts, we're going blue thread locker 2, 85 foot-pounds. Rear diff mount, 85 foot-pounds. All right, it's time to put some control arms back on this thing. I am putting new lower ball joints on this truck, so I figure I might as well do it on the bench now. Run Toyota lower ball joints. Just do it. Don't cheap out on your lower ball joints, people. Beautiful thing. Even though these are in great shape, I'm going to clean them up on the wire wheel and then coat them with anti-seize. This thing's going all the way to Hawaii, and I want the next guy to stand a chance when he tries to take these out. Alright, so both lower control arms are back on the vehicle. Now we're going to remove these 2 rubber bushings from the steering rack and replace them with polyurethane bushings from Tuff Country. I'm going to try my luck with a ball joint press for this job. There's the middle hole, driver's side. Middle, driver's side. Okay, and I grease these bushings up with the same high moly grease I used on the front diff mounts. Side note, if you own a first gen Sequoia or Tundra and you haven't upgraded to polyurethane bushings yet, I would highly recommend it. This was one of the best things I did when I first got my truck. Eliminated all the sloppy steering. Okay, now we're gonna do some work on the stock steering shaft. We're gonna drill these rivets out so we can remove this dust guard. So once you got rid of that dust cover, you're left with two pieces. We're gonna put the rubber portion back in the vise. We'll also be using these two steel sleeves. Steering extension, bent side down. And our 3/8 hardware. Now we're gonna take our stock steering shaft, put it on top of here, and same deal. So it says to use 1 inch. I'm not satisfied with that. I'm gonna replace that hardware with longer stuff. Final product. Next step, we're under the car, passenger side. We'll be using passenger side power steering bracket and the stud that we took out at the beginning. Okay, we're going to use the original hardware from the driver's side as well as two big washers. Finger tight for now. Okay, here's the hardware for this step. 1 9/16 bolt, 2 1/2-inch bolts. And we're going to be working on this guy here. This bracket goes with the weld towards the ground. There's 2 holes right here that it's going to go into the 1/2-inch hardware. 9/16 bolt, lock washer, regular washer, fender washer, down through the rack, additional fender washer, and then rack and pinion bracket, which is threaded. And of course, don't tighten anything yet. Just get it up there. Stock passenger side rack and pinion bracket. This goes in upside down for this step, guys. The stock nut up top. And then they give us a 9/16 and a lock washer for down here. It doesn't line up though. So the fitment issue I'm having is right there. That's what I'm talking about. That's way off. Way off. All right, so I did have a little bit of problem lining this up. What I did was I put this in a vise and I squeezed it together the teeniest bit at a time. I also had to die grind that hole slightly bigger. I'm gonna put this back up here. Going with the bottom first. Be super careful on this one, guys. I almost got into cross thread territory a couple times. Top to bottom, top to bottom. Next, we're going to put these steering lines on an extension bracket using some 5/16 hardware. Time to reinstall the extended steering shaft. Important part here is to just line up your match marks. It's a little tight. Looks like we got to remove this bolt. Pro tip, when you're putting this extension on the steering shaft, just imagine it being in the car, because now what's happened is my match mark is on the other side of this. This extension should be flipped 180 degrees. All right, we're back on the right way. We're gonna kind of fish this in while pushing up on the rack. Lines up top, and they both line up in the bottom. Stock hardware with Loctite. $110. Moving on to these two, 65 foot-pounds. Now we're gonna do this guy down here, 85 foot-pounds. $85. All right, we're done with the truck for a little while. We're on to the spindles. I'm gonna pop this oil seal off using the same method I did for the dust caps on the TV axles. Much success. Next, we're gonna loosen the dust shield. First, we're gonna free the spacer and the ABS tone ring. Now we'll reset it up and push it out the rest of the way. Tone ring, spacer, dust shield, hub. All right, it's time to remove this outer oil seal, little by little. Look at that comparison, huh? Okay, we're ready to transfer all this stuff onto the new spindles. Everything came off in one piece, intact. So next, we're gonna do the driver's side spindle together, and we're gonna put the dust shield and the outer oil seal on, because you have to do those two things before you put the hub in, or else you're taking it back out. Inner oil seal's got to go back in. Spindles are complete. So I'm gonna kind of do like a two-part thing here. I'm gonna get this CV in. Then I'm gonna cut the zip tie holding it up. Slip the upper ball joint through and put the nut on loosely. Ba-bam. Got some new lower ball joint hardware. Put the tie rod in loosely so I can torque these lower ball joint bolts. In order to do the press work, I needed to remove the studs. So let's go ahead and get those back on now. Driver side sway bar extension bracket. We originally planned on using these extended Bilsteins. These are for another drop bracket kit for the first gen Tundra, made by a company called RCD. This kit was not available when we did this project, but we were able to get our hands on the shocks thinking they would work. They ended up just being too long, so we went with the normal Sequoia Bilstein 5100s and used the strut spacers that came with the Tuff Country kit. So we got the Tuff Country 5-inch lift, and with the Bilsteins on the second setting, giving us an extra inch, that made our total lift height 6 inches. It actually went a little bit above that, to be honest. This clip here is me installing the extended Bilsteins. Again, we didn't use them, but I figured I'd leave it on here for continuity. All 4 of the front bump stops got lowered with these brackets. Here's a shot of the airbags and the rear shocks we removed. These things were absolutely smoked. It was the worst handling Sequoia I've ever driven. These are some Apoc Land Cruiser 80 plus 3-inch rear lift springs that ended up lifting the rear of the Sequoia to match the front perfectly. No spacers were needed. Since this was an air suspension truck, we did need to supply the rear coil insulators. Luckily we had a pair laying around the shop from my wife's old Sequoia. We were also able to source the extended Bilsteins for the rear of the RCD Tundra kit, and these worked great. We just needed to change the bottom mounting situation. Again, since this was an airbag truck, there was no channel in the upper spring perch to hold the spring in. It was just a flat indent. So I welded a stud onto the spring isolator that'll poke through the frame and get fastened with a nut on the other side. I did this on my truck years ago and I had great luck with it. When we were talking to the customer about this build, this was a non-negotiable, the I'm Keith Panhard correction kit. For the money, it's the best improvement in handling that you could possibly do for your lifted Sequoia, or any other lifted IFS Toyota for that matter. The front sway bar got lower, but the rear links needed to be extended quite a bit. We used some steel from an old Toyota 4Runner upper control arm and welded the Sequoia ends to it. That's about it, guys. Unfortunately, we don't have much footage of the completed truck. I'll throw some before and after shots up to finish this video out. The wheels and tires we used for these pictures are Michael's 15-inch trail ready beadlocks and 35-inch Mickey Thompsons. We threw them on with some 2-inch spacers just to get a couple pictures. Dante plans on getting some wheels and tires when he gets back to his home state of Hawaii. I think the wheels that he had on it are from a 5th gen 4Runner. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, thanks for commenting.